Hello, I'm back. I'm here to talk about the importance of diversity in children's books today. With everything going on, I thought it was important for me to make this video because you need to have every culture represented in your life at some point or somehow. So I think it's good to start with children. They need to see books that are unlike them, that have cultures unlike their own represented in their daily lives. It's important for them to see people who are different from them or people who are the same as them in children's books. If you're a teacher, you should have books in your classroom library that are diverse enough for each child in your classroom. Makes them feel as if their culture is just as important as the next. If it's not represented, it makes them feel like their culture is not important, which it weighs heavily on a child over time. If you're a parent or an older sibling, you should have books that represent other cultures so that your child can see different cultures represented in your home as well. That goes for other things other than books as well. For myself, I have a lot of different books that represent different cultures in my own library, and I have a ton of children's books as well. And I used to read books to my little sister so that just weren't the same culture as hers. We are even different cultures, so it's important for me to represent my culture for her and her culture for me. So, and as a parent, it's the same if you have an adopted child or your foster, or your child is just a different race than you. It's important that you represent both races and other cultures as well. It doesn't have to be, if you're a parent, it doesn't have to be as many cultures as it would be if you were a teacher, but it's important to have more than one, more than two, more than three at least, represented in your own library at home. There are books that you can buy for students that are also bilingual. So they have English and another language in them. For example, I have the book Selena. It's a children's book. On the first page, it has that Selena was born in Lake Jackson, Texas. And then it says the same thing in Spanish. So that's important for bilingual students. They have books like that for all cultures, actually, all of them. This is very simple. Big Bertha was the name of her bus, and then it says it in Spanish, and it shows a picture, so that's important. They have books. They have so many books. If you go to a Barnes & Noble, they have a whole section that represents other language in children's books, which is super important. There are also books that tell about the history of other cultures. For example, I have this book. It is called The Seed of Compassion. It is by His Holiness, the Dalai Lama, and then it's illustrated by another person, but it shares the story of when he was little. The potential to build more compassion in their lives. I have another book that is about Maya Angelou, so it represents the African American culture. She was an activist for women's rights, and she was a poet, so that was also important. It talks about when she was little and how she didn't have a voice, or she felt like she didn't have a voice, and then at the end she speaks in front of the White House when she's older. And then this is one of my favorites. It's a book about a little girl that feels like her skin color doesn't match anyone else. She goes to a school the same way, and then they use an analogy to represent day and night and how we need both. There are also books that explain traditions and what has happened or changed in the past about other cultures. There are books about leaders of the past with different cultures, so it's important that they see some kind of power or goals reached as other cultures. There's also books that tell traditional stories, like Cinderella, for example, Cendrillon by Robert D. Souci. It's a Caribbean version of Cinderella. It includes French Creole words. I read a book the other day called Imagine. I posted it on my YouTube channel. It's primarily in English, but it also includes Spanish words, so that's important for other kids to read. So it's not completely in Spanish, but they include Spanish words to help out kids who speak Spanish and also people who don't speak Spanish, so they can learn words that are in their language. Overall, right now, it's really crucial to have other cultures and races represented in children's literature. It makes them feel important. It capitalizes on the importance of other cultures and how your culture, your race, isn't more important than the next. And I'm going to read a few. I picked out my favorite parts of each book. So, from this book, it says, "There had to be a way to get her back. Day set off to find Night, and she did. 'I miss you,' said Day. 'I miss you too,' said Night, 'but you don't know what it's like to be treated badly for being dark.' 'You're right, I don't,' Day replied, 'but what I do know is that we need you just the way you are. Come and see.' Night returned and the people rejoiced. 'We need the darkest night to get the deepest rest. We need you so that we can grow and dream and keep our secrets to ourselves.' The stars chimed in. 'Brightness isn't just for daylight. Light comes in all colors, and some light can only be seen in the dark.' So that's important for Black culture. It's important for them to know that they are just as important as other people. This is Maya Angelou. So in the beginning it talks about how she feels like she doesn't have a voice, and then in the middle it says, even though Maya was a great student, she was told that she couldn't get a good job because of the color of her skin. And then she gets a job as a cook and a streetcar conductor, and she was a dancer and a singer and an actress. She traveled the world, and in America, she worked to help people get treated equally. Here, she's advocating for women's rights. And then when she got older, she decided to use her voice to write a book. And at the end, she speaks in front of our entire world. When Bill Clinton became president, Maya read a poem. She had once been a little girl who was afraid to use her voice. Now she was speaking to an entire country about her favorite thing, hope. And then at the end, there's a timeline of Maya Angelou, and children can also read and learn about her. There's a ton of different books from this author, Lisbeth Kaiser. There's books about Maya Angelou, there's one about Coco Chanel, there's one about Amelia Earhart, Frida Kahlo. So a lot of different cultures are represented in the books that she writes. My favorite part from The Seed of Compassion is, in this way, she tended the seed that most important lesson by demonstrating how to practice compassion. She showed me as a child that it was possible to treat all people with warmheartedness and to help ease their suffering. Like a tall tree never forgets the seed it sprouted from, I've often returned to the seed of compassion my mother planted, and which I carried with me, as a small child at home, as a young monk in training, and today as I spread the message of compassion all around the world. So as a kid, he's taught it's important in their culture to plant and give. He plays outside, unlike I grew up playing. It's important that it says no one in my family could have expected that I was that child, least of all me, but after passing a series of tests where I correctly identified the belongings of the previous Dalai Lama and held them with a great sense of familiarity, our visitors were satisfied and they found the boy they were looking for. So about achieving your dreams again, which is important for each kid to know that what they can do, whatever they want to do. Selena, again, this is another children's picture book. She grew up in a small town in Texas, and then she becomes a famous actress and singer and wins a ton of awards, which if that's what a kid wants to do, then they have to put their mind to it and know that they are able to do it, and they have to see that people of their culture can do things like that. Culture is represented in a lot of different ways, and we have to make sure that as children they're growing up seeing other cultures, people who are unlike them, people who are the same as them, growing up to be actresses and people who are activists and people who represent their own culture and are proud of their culture. So it's really important that diversity is represented in children's books. So thank you for listening, and I'll see you later.